to introduce Blake Daisy. He's the Sacramento beekeeper, but a few random facts he might not mention in his presentation. He plays the trumpet, he is left-handed, and he is fluent in Spanish. So let's welcome Blake and let's learn about beekeeping.
Good morning. Get my notes set up here. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And thank you to Kaylee for giving us the invitation and linking us up together. All right. That's a fun one. So what do you guys think real estate has to do with beekeeping? That looks like real estate. And this one's out of a commercial building. So we do a lot of commercial, a lot of residential. It's the Bridgestone tires in the Granite Bay area. And we'll service anywhere from Davis to the foothills, Marysville, all the way down south to Galt, Herald area. How'd you like to have that above your bedroom while you're sleeping? This is a bedroom, master bedroom in Folsom area. And you're looking up at the ceiling, and this area is where there's an exterior facing wall. And there are the 3 vents here going into the attic. And those vent holes were busted open by a rodent or a bird, and the bees found it and moved right in. All they need is a 3/8 inch space to move in, and they will take over. And that is about 4.5 feet long by about 3 feet wide. And the angle of the roof, obviously going up at the attic, increased the angle of the hive. So the hive just got bigger as they drew it out. They will draw it all the way down from the ceiling, all the way down to the insulation above the sheetrock. And that is a hive that's about 18 months old. So that takes them about 1.5 years to build. And about a 24-hour period, they'll build a size of comb, about the size of my hand. And they go from there. Here's a garage. This exterior wall, again, old conduit had been removed from the exterior of the building and not patched up. And bees moved right in. They found the spot pretty quickly. One of the more common calls we get are for chimneys. So we got bees in the chimney, and Santa doesn't like it. So we've got a team of 4 people here. We've got one on the ground as well. And we've got some tools that we've designed to get the comb out of the chimney. The comb is about this far down the chimney. The bees generally go about 18 to 24 inches down from the chimney. My opinion is to get away from the sunlight. So like she said, I'm Sacramento. I lived around the region. I've lived anywhere from downtown Sacramento up to Georgetown. So I've gotten to see the different types of forage that bees bring in, different types of honey, different types of calls. I've got 10 years experience in beekeeping. My main area of focus and expertise is in agriculture, and specifically integrated pest management. We started the company for beekeeping about 5 years ago after seeing some opportunities in the area. Mainly opportunities for education and also answering calls for service when people need help getting bees out of a wall. And then we use cultural, chemical, biological, mechanical, and physical. And those are different mechanisms we use to attack all our problems that we have, either in the farm or with beekeeping or approaching a client's problem that we're going to work on. Chemical would be spraying Roundup on your weeds to kill them. Biological would be hiring a goat to come eat your weeds. So mechanical, lawnmower. Physical would be just you going out there and pulling the weeds yourself. So by using all 5 of those mechanisms lightly, you can really affect a problem instead of having to use a really dangerous chemical or use a big excavating machine. And today we want to translate how this information of beekeeping relates to real estate. Because real estate means houses, offices, government buildings. Any building that's bought or sold is essentially real estate. And I know I'm not only speaking to real estate agents here. We have title companies, and I talked to someone that runs a chimney company, which is awesome because we're going to have some fun there. But bees will treat anything as real estate. They'll use sprinkler boxes. They'll use underneath the decking of a house. So we use critical thinking, and we want to have a concise approach to solve these problems because we want to make our clients, we want to have them be satisfied. We want to be professional. We want to fix their problem the first time. So honeybees can cause damage to structures. The bees won't initially go attack a building. Usually it's woodpeckers, rodents, mice. They'll bust open a hole in the wall and the bees will find that. They are very opportunistic. And like I said, they only need a 3/8 of an inch gap. So anywhere on a building, if that 3-inch gap exists, they'll move right in and take over. Long term, they can cause enough damage to merit an insurance claim. And I'll show you some photos of that further on. The hole was opened up initially by the flashing of the roof peeling back, and then bees moved in, and the bees died, and all the honey in the hive started rotting into the walls. The walls started rotting, and then dry rot initiated and cascaded down all 3 levels of the chimney down to the first floor. And that ended up being about a $15,000 insurance claim just from honeybees that were neglected. They knew they were there. We also partner with local arborists. This is Scott from the Fair Oaks Arborist unit out here, and this is a hive in a tree, and it's a hazard tree over the house. So another thing when you're looking at houses and you're doing your inspections, and I believe they're called visual aid disclosures. So this is something to look for when you're doing that. Obviously a hazard tree, any tree with a cavity in it. And so we partner with them to safely remove the tree, get the log with the bees down safely so we can relocate them. A little bit of info about Placer County. There's 78 registered beekeepers. So that means 78 people have filed paperwork saying, I have bees in your county. And then of those 78 beekeepers, 57 of them reside in Placer County. I'm one of the beekeepers that do not reside in Placer County. I've got bees in Lincoln area, and I live in Sacramento. So we register our hives, and there's some code enforcement that we have to follow on that as far as labeling. And in Placer County, there's the code, and currently it reads, whatever the agricultural commissioner says goes. So they're currently meeting on it right now, and I don't know in your industry, but in agriculture industry, Placer County has been one of the most cumbersome counties in terms of code enforcement and zoning. So we're dealing with that, and we're dealing with complaints from homeowners with pools, and beekeepers pull up next door in the summertime. The bees are encroaching, bothering people in the pool. We get about 30, 40 calls a summer. What do I do about bees in the pool? Help me. So being a nuisance to the public is a big issue. And if it's not managed correctly, the bees will swarm and kind of do whatever they want. So of those 169 separate locations, that represents about 16,000 beehives. So on average, that's about 100 hives per location. And the agricultural commissioner estimates that 33% of these hives are unregistered. So you could assume it's closer to about 24,000. And one beehive needs about 1 to 2 acres of area to forage. So if you pull up to a house that's on the market and your client wants to buy it and you look next door and there's 30 beehives, might be something to address. And then here's some of the zoning classifications on residential plots, what size they are, and then what type of animal husbandry is allowed on there. Like I said, the bees will pick any spot they would like. And here's a storm drain. And it must have been a nice shady spot for them to pull up. But that just kind of illustrates the creativity that the bees have in there. So this is a frame of honeycomb. So if you ever look into a hive, this is what you're going to see in the hive, and that's the liquid gold. That's the good stuff. And I brought a jar today, and we talked earlier who to give it to, and it's going to go to the bravest person who sat closest to the stage. I think you might be the winner. But this is the problem in the wall if the hive were to die. It's going to attract ants, cockroaches, mice, and all sorts of things, and it's going to start to mold, rot, and ferment. And that could cause some property damage down the road, and maybe some health issues for the residents. My job depends on ag, all across the board. We do a small farm, but mainly beekeeping is our area of business, and agriculture is really important to your business, because if we don't have employees that are working for agriculture, they won't have money to buy houses. So it's important that we maintain our agriculture community, kind of increase the overall economy as well. So why are bees important? There's a giant market for pollination. Beekeepers all across the country bring 90 to 95% of their beehives west for the almond pollination. And a lot of them are coming down Interstate 80 right through Placer County. And a lot of times what they do is they'll drop their bees off in Penryn, Loomis, all over the place. And they'll drop 500 hives off, let them hang out, they'll go make another trip, and then they'll move them all out to the almonds, all the way from Bakersfield all the way up to Chico. But while they're sitting in your county, those bees are casting swarms out into your county. And the beekeeper comes, takes his hives, and then moves on to his jobs and leaves you with the problem. And Sacramento is the capital for the swarms in the world. We have the most, and that has a lot to do with our agricultural location. Also 5, 99, 80, and 50 all just, they group up right here. And it makes for some awesome traffic if you have to endure that. But it really puts us in the forefront in beekeeping. And we also have UC Davis right next to us. And they're the leading industry experts in education and laboratory technicians as far as beekeeping. So we're really fortunate to be right in the middle of the mecca of beekeeping, both in activity and with education. Some of the main products are obviously your honey sales. It's a good food product. You can also use it for cosmetics along with beeswax. There's a giant market for beeswax in the makeup and cosmetic industry. And there's also a lot of medical applications for honey and beeswax in the dental industry. Pollen and propolis. Propolis is resin from conifer trees, and the bees actually go to pine trees, pull off some of the pitch, the sticky pitch, and bring it to the hive, and they use that to seal up the gaps in the wall. So when we're looking at some of the pictures, I'll point out some propolis on some hives that we have. And the propolis helps protect their hive, almost like a yellow jacket has a paper envelope around it. The bees build this antimicrobial shell around the inside of their hive. And that's how 100,000 bees can live in a little box and not get sick. So we have about 1 million acres in our almond market right now. With the droughts affecting that, a lot of almond farmers are actually pulling their almonds out and replacing them with walnuts, or just letting the fields go entirely. And we need 2 hives per acre to effectively pollinate almond trees. So we've got 2 million hives coming in around Valentine's Day. And that's, I'm sure you guys have seen on the road, the big semi-truck. It's got the big stack of hives, and they cover it with the black cloth. And those are coming anywhere from the East Coast, Midwest, anywhere from the north. So pollination is important to us because it prevents erosion control. The more bees pollinate plants, the more seeds they produce. The more seeds they produce, the more plants grow. The more plants grow, the roots help retain the soil and prevent erosion. So that's going to help everybody out trying to build, maintain their property. It's also going to help with drought. It's not going to make it rain, but what it does is helps the ground cover. The more ground cover there is, the less sun there is hitting the ground. It's going to reduce evaporation and keep the soil temperature a little bit cooler. So the more plants we have out there overall is going to be beneficial. And then pollination also helps feed a lot of animals. Clover, miner's lettuce, there's so many plants around here that are native. The bees pollinate, the deer eat, the rodents eat, the mice eat, the birds take care of. So the bees are a really important part of our ecosystem. And honeybees are not from America. They're fairly invasive, and they're not supposed to be here. They were brought here by the settlers in the 1700s, and the Native American called them the white man's fly, because they had never observed these large colonies of bees. In America, all we have are small colonies of bumblebees, carpenter bees. We have mason bees, leafcutter bees, but they all have really, really small population-sized colonies, and they take a long time to get going. And the honeybees will come in with 30,000 strong coming out of winter. So imagine all of you trying to compete with 2 or 3 people for food. They're not going to get much at the table. So part of being a beekeeper, a responsible beekeeper, is I teach people to plant native plants, to attract native pollinators, to help out all the native pollinators that we're displacing. Because like I said, 1 beehive will take up about 1 acre of forage. So what we do, we have several tasks throughout the year. We maintain our hives. Based on our integrated pest management program, we want to make sure the bees are healthy, free of disease, pests, and parasites. We want to make sure they're stacking up enough surplus honey so they can get through the winter time. And then one of our most common tasks is relocating swarms. Has anybody seen a swarm of bees before? Anywhere? You probably heard it before you saw it. Sounds like a tornado coming through. So what that is, that's a reproductive swarm. So the way the bees reproduce is when they get too overpopulated in their hive. Could be in a house, could be in a beehive, could be in a composting bin. Whatever size that cavity is, when they fill it up, they're going to say, hey, we're full, you got to move out. So the old queen will leave and take half the bees with her. And that's kind of like mom and dad kicking kids out. So they leave, and they get their act together, and that's their first move. They move a total of 3 times. Their first move is leaving the hive, and they find a spot to hang out. And the second time is a longer jaunt. And that's to kind of get away from mom and dad. And what that does is it displaces them from competition, because you don't want to set up right next door. I don't know if anybody remembers that show, Everyone Loves Raymond. They moved out and lived across the street. It's like, go away. And the reason the old queen leaves is because she's already fertile. She's already laying eggs. So when that swarm lands in a new location, they can immediately start laying and go into town. And then after that, the remaining bees at the old hive will raise a new queen. The new queen will emerge, and then she will go reproduce, come back, and then pick up where grandma left off. So that's the cycle, and that could happen 3 or 4 times in a year. If you have a hive the size of a shoebox, they're going to fill it up in about 2 weeks. But if you have a hive the size of this podium, it's going to take them all season long, and they won't swarm until about May. But then you have a giant swarm coming out in May. So it depends on the cavity size, and we'll see that a lot when we're doing the removals. And then hive removal, that's removing an active hive from a structure. And I brought a couple of visual aids on the table if you guys want to check them out before you guys leave. This is an example of some comb that's starting to rot. It's been abandoned by bees. And then got another piece that's in good condition. And they have very, very potent smells to them. So when we remove a hive, we're removing the comb, and the comb is animal fat. The bees produce it from the segments in their abdomen. So it's very calorie intensive. It takes about 7 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. So when we remove a hive, it's very important for us to save the comb they built and give that back to them so they don't have to work to build it all again. Education. I love teaching. I love getting involved, getting hands-on, being a mentor to people that want to learn, or partners to people that are already experienced. It's pretty abysmal how few young people we have in agriculture, and it's almost depressing. I'm 36, and for the last 10 years, I've always been the youngest person in the room at the Beekeeping Association meetings. So education is a big passion of mine to get younger people involved. We're working with school districts to get some grants so they can get some beehives on campus. It's been a big liability issue for us to work with that, so we're almost there. And then we sell products. So pollination contracts. A farmer will pay a beekeeper to bring their hive to pollinate their crops. So that's an option in the business. Very lucrative business. That's why beekeepers are bringing millions of hives across the country to the almond orchards, because they pay good money. It is a high-risk job. It's very perilous, driving the bees over in the middle of winter. But it has its rewards. And then we have sales from hive products, honey, propolis, and wax. All the blue spots are swarms from the past 2 years. And you can see where the hot spots are. And there's a little bit of empty spots here. And that, first and foremost, has to do with population of humans. If there's nobody there to see it, there's nobody there to call me. This is pretty empty out here. And there's also not a lot of trees. There's some oaks out there, but when it gets dry, and there's nothing going on. You got the neighborhood. You have a lot more forage in a neighborhood because everyone's got their roses going, their sunflowers, their tomatoes. Everyone's got their garden. So you see there, hot spot. And a lot of these correlate to water sources and nearby food sources. And what we're doing with this information, we want to document as much as we can so we can be more proficient at responding. And we've cut off the left side. There's personal information of people on that side. We've got the date, time, the GPS locations, location on the property where it was found. This one says roof into chimney. This one's in a tree and a shrub, Japanese maple, redwood branch, small holly. We've got the height of the cluster, how high it was off the ground, what the weather was like that day, what the size of the swarm looked like. And we've got a bunch of other metrics on there that we use. We want to capture all that data so we can better be prepared to put people in positions to go collect swarms and answer more calls for service. So what is a swarm versus a hive? We talked a little bit about a swarm earlier. It's a group of reproductive bees moving out so they can establish a new hive, and that's how they propagate and take over the area. This is a tree in the McClatchy Park area in Sacramento, and they will take the shape of whatever they land on. So a long, skinny branch, they just spread all the way out. Normally that'd be a problem for them in the winter because they're losing their thermal mass, but this was in the springtime. They got the sun shining on them. They'll do okay. Because they're cold-blooded. They have to move around to stay warm, which means they have to eat honey. So these bees are not aggressive generally because they don't have a hive to defend. There's no developing bees, and there's no honey. There's no comb yet. That is just all bees right there. So they're generally pretty docile. And I tend not to wear a suit when I do this part because I've had experience doing it. But oftentimes you'll have a call. Someone will say, hey, I've got a beehive in the front. Can you come help? And I'll go show up, and it's spread out in 2 or 3 spots. I'm going, what's happened? Talk to the neighbor. So yeah, the kids were out there throwing rocks at it before you got here. So just because it's a swarm doesn't mean they're not going to be nice, because they were already agitated from the kids doing that. And so established hives, as opposed to a swarm, it's when a swarm has moved into a cavity and started building comb. The queen starts laying, and they are in defensive mode. That's their home base, and they'll continue to build out that area until it's full. That's an example of an open-air colony. This is out of Lincoln area. And that's a south-facing wall, so they like the warm side over there. And that's about the normal shape you'll see them build, that V or that U shape. And that's the way they're drawing the comb out. So best practices, and what should you do if you see a swarm? Now, if you see a swarm, maintain a safe distance, especially if you know that people in the area might be allergic. We don't want people to get stung. And take a photo or video. Oftentimes that helps us identify it's not going to be yellow jackets. When we're responding to the call, that'd be more of a pest control service there. And if you relayed as much information to a certified beekeeper as possible, that's going to help us when we arrive. Do we need a ladder? Do we need tools? Do we need to open up, prune some branches out? What's our capability here? And when I say certified beekeeper, we teach classes because we have people that are interested in bees. They've spent $500 on their hive and their suit, and they're ready to go, and they need bees. So they take our class. And so they take our class, and we teach them how to successfully and safely recover a swarm. And we want them to have the tools to be safe and do it effectively and efficiency, and also have fun. That's the most important part. That's why I do this. I can't get enough. So we teach a class. They take a little test. They're certified. We want to make sure that they have the aptitude to do the job, and then they'll respond to the call. And then we'll follow up with the client after that and see how things went. And we don't generally charge for swarm removals. We'll accept donations, because a lot of times the calls come from you walking your dog. Oh yeah, I see a bee on the corner there. And you're like, okay, well, $50. And you're like, well, it's not my tree. It's not. So charging for those, it's more of a community service more than anything, because it's not your fault the swarm landed in your tree. But the donations do help. Getting us out there helps with the labor and the time, the gas to get moving around. And the reason that's really important is we don't want the bees moving into a place where they might not survive, or move into a place where they're going to incur an expense. Because the hive removal is where we do charge. We have a contractor on staff, and we go give a bid for removal. So if we can get that swarm before it moves in, we'll save homeowners a lot of money. And also, they might move into a place where they might not survive the winter cold or the summer heat, depending on what time of year it is. Same program for the active hives. If you're doing a home inspection and you see a hive somewhere, try and identify on the outside of the building where the hive is coming in. And if there's anybody living there, notify the residents to maintain a safe distance. And also, bees like to go for light. So at nighttime, so if you have bees in the attic and the sun goes down, we generally turn our lights on, have dinner, hang out. So the bees that are in the attic, they see the can lights, or ceiling fan fixtures, and they want to come go to the sun. So oftentimes at night, people are calling, hey, I got bees coming in the house. And so when you're looking for bees, check the windowsills, because the bees are want to go to the light. So if you think you have a hive somewhere, windowsill is the first place to check, because that's where they're going to want to congregate. And you're often just going to find dead ones, because they're just going to sit there and try and get out until they expire. So other types of calls we get are yellow jackets, wasps, and hornets. Those are not fun. I do not do that. I did it once, and I'll never do it again. Blooming plants attract attention. So if you're doing an inspection on a house and for your client that they want to buy, there's a really cool app I use. It's called Picture This. It's free, and you can take a picture of a plant, and it'll tell you all about it. And the reason being is you don't want to have a giant citrus tree next to somebody's fire pit where they're hanging out and barbecuing, because at some point in the year it's going to be covered in honeybees. So something to think about. Look at the landscape. If you spend so much time in the house looking for things to make sure people are comfortable when they move in, also look outside in the yard. Because oftentimes we'll get calls, I have a swarm of bees over here. I'll go over there, and it's just bees covered on a lemon tree, and they're just going to work. They're just getting all the nectar and leaving. But it's so many bees, people might think they have a swarm there. And it's also not convenient to have bees flying around you when you're trying to barbecue or have company. If you have a water feature, a pool, I've got a little pond in the backyard with some water plants in there, and there's 400 or 500 bees in that all day long. So here's some consequences of ignoring a hive. This one was in Rancho Cordova off Olson Boulevard. It's actually a roof of a school. And I don't know if you can see their delineation marks. There's a line right here, there's a line right here, and there's a line going down that way. So this is year number 1, year number 2, year number 3. They repeatedly sprayed this hive with pesticides, and it just killed all the bees in the hive. But because the cavity smelled like bees, guess what happened next year? Moved right back in. Repeat, repeat, repeat. They did it for years. So we finally got this hive out on the 4th year. And that's the most I've ever seen in the wall. And you see the bottom, that's actually the bees starting to mold at the bottom because of the moisture in the wall. So it's going to attract ants, roaches. The mice don't really go to eat. The mice actually go in there to stay warm, to avoid the cool of the night. And when the honey ferments, so honey is 17% water content. So when the flowers produce nectar that's about 99% water. So the bees bring back 99% water, and they have to dehydrate it with their wings by fanning and using the heat of the hive. And once that gets down to 17%, they will cap it with wax. If the hive dies, ants and roaches start opening up those caps and exposing the honey to the air. The honey is actually going to start drawing moisture in from the air to the point where it gains enough moisture to start to ferment and rot. And if anybody's familiar with fermenting, it causes CO2 bubbles to form. That's why beer has bubbles. That's why it pops when you open the bottle. So imagine honey in a cell that's starting to bubble, and it bubbles out and expands. Now you have this just giant mess dripping down in the walls. You know, like we said, it's going to be a swarm attractant. So when hives are removed, we seal up the wall to make sure no bees are going to re-enter that area. And obviously consequences of ignoring a hive are danger of stings. When we get to the summer months, there's not a lot of flowers blooming out there, obviously. The bees get a little bit more defensive of what they have in their hive because other beehives will investigate. If they feel like they're weak enough, they'll actually go and invade the other hive, kill them all, and take all their honey. Another danger of stings comes from a hive that's got some pressure from rats, rodents. If those animals are bugging the bees at night all the time, they're going to be upset bees. So when a beekeeper goes in there, they're going to be furious. We have no idea why, but it's the overnight pest pressure. So oftentimes when you're doing inspections, look for rodents, because it's often going to lead to avenues for being a vector for bees to get in. Safety first. We always try and be as safe as possible, because it's no use getting hurt when we're out there. And here's a shot from downtown. This is Oakmont of East Sac. It's a retirement home. And the beehive moved into this corner area. This is a vent coming up from the basement parking garage to evacuate the car exhaust. And the bees moved right in the top. So we were OSHA certified with the boom lift and the bucket, and then we are wearing our harnesses up there as well. So I want to do this for a long time. I don't want to get hurt. Here's the importance of responding. We touched on this a little bit earlier. The bees will do well without us. They've been around for millions of years. They're obviously not going away. And we get about 200 to 250 calls a year for service for bees. And if bees were endangered, I feel like my phone would not be ringing very much. When you hear people saying, save the bees, we need the bees because we've created an artificial demand for our food supply. So we do need the bees because we need our food. But they're doing just fine without us. This is a hive in an irrigation box at the water treatment facility downtown Sacramento. So underground, we had to cut out all this rosemary bush just to even access the ground level. And they built out the entire area. And that's a place where they might not have survived the winter, because that area is prone to flooding. If any of the valves inside malfunction, it would just fill the hive with water. And also, the hive's biggest enemy is moisture. So bees do not like moist places. And most hives capitalize from spaces that are open from rodents, birds, aging infrastructure, or even poor carpentry. And I've seen 2x4s that were put together just wonky, and it's an easy entry. This is Bridgestone tire in Granite Bay, and there's a very steep grade here along the ground, so we had to rent this lift to get up. And I'm about 6'5" about, and this hive was about as long as I was. And they had been there for about 3 or 4 years. And in about this much, this size of honeycomb, you can fit about 8 pounds of honey. So if you have 8, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, you can have a hive that could weigh 300 pounds. So in a load-bearing structure that might be failing, having all that weight in there might be an issue. This is on Cameron Park, exterior of one of those really cool geodesic houses. It was really neat. So that was a hive that had been there for several years. This is the capped honey that the bees had left over after they left. Another thing about the beeswax, it's a massive fire hazard. That is a big candle. So if you leave that in there and the fire starts in the house, that's going to be a big, big, big problem. And a lot of times people call us, I got bees in my chimney. I started a fire and I can't get them out. Help me. Like, no, put the fire out. So wax, big fire danger, big fire hazard. So where's the need? We're already receiving calls from your peers. Hi, I've got a client selling the house. Can you get the bees out before it? No problem, we'll be there. So that happens about 35 to 50 times a year, and it's always from a real estate agent. And we also get calls from your clients, people that want to buy houses. Hey, I got bees in the house, I need them out before I sell it. So these people are already calling us, and you guys are already calling us. So this is why it was really important to get out here and connect everybody. And there's also a small number of professionals in the industry, and we need more. There's only 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3 entities in the Sacramento region that are capable of doing this work. And just as much as we need younger people backfilling agricultural roles, this is something that has a demand in the future as well. Education, both in animal husbandry, permaculture, which is gardening and farming, how to be more efficient with that, and how to best educate to prevent vectoring of bees into structures. That's the biggest need, because they very rarely build outside, like that one we saw at the exterior. And so after the removal, when we come and remove the bees out of the structure, we drive off, we are halfway done with our job. We have to go back to the house, get the bees out of the vacuum that we use. The vacuum is designed to pull the bees out gently. We put those back into a new hive, relocate them with all of their old comb, and then we have to monitor them for disease, pests, and kind of get them back on the right track, kind of babysit them until they get back together. Here's one we mentioned earlier. At the top here is where the bees were entering. The flashing had been peeled back on top of the building, and the hive descended behind the roof line to the first fire break right here. And when we opened that part up, then we noticed the dry rot, and you can see the dry rot just cascades all the way down to ground level. So that's a 2-story building with the chimney up top, and that whole entire siding had to be replaced. And that was the one this year that ended up being an insurance claim for the homeowner. And when the swarms move into the house, they're not very large, so they move in, and unless you're out there watching, you won't see it happen. And what tends to occur is 2 or 3 weeks later, that hive is now building and booming in population, and you go, what is that up there? I don't know. And you say, hey, I've got bees. Yeah, they've been here for 2 or 3 days, so we'll go up there, and you open it up, and it's already massive. It takes about 5 minutes to move in. If you turn around to go fill your coffee and you come back, you won't even know it happened. So when you're doing your inspections, vectors, openings into cavities and structures, could be in trees. So if you're looking for hazard trees when you're looking at a house, make sure the tree's not going to fall on a house. And if it's got cavities in there, make sure they're empty. And I always have a licensed arborist come out. We use Fair Oaks arborists, and they come out and inspect our hazard trees for us. Or a landscape large enough for bees to have an interest. It could be wooden arbors, it could be sprinkler irrigation boxes, it could be under a deck. You have a deck material out there. And for interior hives, any hive that's devoid of insulation, they'll move in. And even if they can get in the top, what they'll do is they'll bit by bit pull the insulation out and drop it out the front door, and they'll excavate more space as they grow. And they'll also chew through the backside of sheetrock. They won't chew through the paper side, but they'll chew through the top. So you can almost poke your finger right through the paper when you're looking at a hive. So for exterior, general wear and tear, like often the flashing is one that gets in there because that glue starts to go bad. Birds and rodent holes. Any removed infrastructure, like conduit, old phone lines that weren't patched up, they'll go right into that. The attic vents going along the top of the eaves, they like to get in. Any warped siding, and soffit spaces. Soffit spaces are really popular with them as well. Landscape, we talked earlier about plants that might be attracting bees. Obviously, plants bloom once a year, so if you have a whole row of the same plant, you can assume that that's all going to be blooming around the same time. So something to think about when you're looking at your inspections, just to let the homeowner know, hey, you've got a bunch of plants, a bunch of flowering plants next to your pool. And then neighbors. 25% of our swarm calls come from people that say, my neighbor has a hive. She's elderly. She can't get out there and take care of it. Every year this happens. They come over my fence. So when you're doing an inspection of a house, I'd want to know if I had a really mean dog next door. I'd want to know if I had bees next door. It's just very, very good information to have, because some people get a little terrified of bees, and they're upset when they see that they're living so close. So whether it's from an established hive or if it's a feral hive, and a feral hive could be a hive in a tree that someone's just leaving alone. So when we talk about flyover barrier, it's part of the language that we want to put into the Placer County zoning laws. In Sacramento, we need a 6-foot flyover. That means the bees have to fly over something 6 feet tall, and that puts them on an elevated path. That way they're not in foot traffic of people walking around. And you also have to provide a water supply, and that's also something that's going to be in the draft for the Placer County ordinance. And that's on their website if you want to check it out. And I encourage, if you guys are interested, to speak to them, because we need more people. We've already spoken until we're blue in the face. So providing a water supply, oftentimes you'll provide water for the bees, and they'll walk right past it and go to the neighbor's pool. They seem to like dirty water opposed to clean water. And then in Placer County, you're currently limited to 5 hives on a residential plot, and I believe it's more hives based on lot size. But besides that, that's the only language in the Placer County Agricultural Code for honeybees. And imagine what would upset you if you had honeybees next door. So that's what we want to try and implement, because we have this battle of the residents don't want bees there and beekeepers want to put bees there. We want to be able to compromise at some point. So this is a Matsuda's nursery. It's about 160 acres growing grounds, and this is where Green Acres grows all their plants for sale. So we've got hives set up along there. And they do pollinate some of the plants, but the plants just go out for sale. So it's a little free food for them to get out. Speaking of education, we need more young people involved. This was a cutout we did out of a tree. So we had the crew out there. They brought the big tree down after they cut it real gently and slow, and then we dissected the log, got the bees out. This is the bee vacuum. And you can see all the bees inside. They're hanging upside on the screen right here. And this is repurposed beehive. So we'll put this vacuum on top of a new beehive and let the bees walk right down in there. So that was really important to us to have kids there that day. And this couple is from Newcastle, and they're brand new beekeepers, and they were friends of the homeowner having the tree removed. And they would say, "We love the bees, we love to have them." So no problem. So we educated them a little bit on how to relocate a hive, and they had a great time. This one is out of Carmichael area by Del Campo High School. So the bees moved into the wall. Right here you can see the start of the comb. And just to the left over the fence is a neighbor that's got hives. And we did 3 swarm recoveries from this same tree from that same hive this year. So people aren't managing their hives, casting repeat swarms. I don't know if you guys recognize her at all. She's Tina McCua. We've been trying to get her out there beekeeping. But yeah, thank you very much. You're welcome.
Wow, that was, everybody was just in awe over your presentation. He looks like he has some stuff up here we can look at.
Yeah, come check it out.
And after tour, will you hang around for the next 15 minutes or so if you have questions?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's give a big round of applause for Blake, and we have a little gift as a token of our appreciation.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is stuff that I had no idea about. I know it's been prevalent in some cases. I've seen bees around, but nothing like this, and didn't really know this existed. So thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate that. Great information. Blake, on behalf of the Placer County Association, a small token of our appreciation. Thank you once again, Blake. Blake Dacey, ladies and gentlemen.